Hello and welcome to this week's tutorial. That's right, we're getting into explosions, finally, right? I mean, you guys have been emailing me ever since I started the site, asking me if I can do an explosion tutorial. I don't know why I didn't do it sooner, really. It's quite a fun topic. But anyway, it's finally here, so that's what we're going to be doing. This is the finished scene that I'm showing you right now. Don't worry if this looks confusing and painful over the top. Most of this is irrelevant, and we won't be doing a lot of this in the tutorial. We're going to stick it to the basics. We're just going to be getting into the smoke simulator. So teaching you about all the settings in that, how to create an sort of a big explosion effect with wafting smoke and things like that. We're also going to be getting into the materials, very important, how to turn that smoke into actual fire, and then also creating debris and things like that inside the simulator, as well as a shockwave effect and a little bit of compositing as well. So hopefully gonna have a bit of fun, guys. Gonna keep it chillaxed. I mean, it's Christmas, guys. Come on. I mean, if we can't just sit down and blow stuff up together, I mean, you know, who are we? So let's start by opening up a new scene in Blender. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is to create the smoke simulation. That's the main point of this tutorial. So for a smoke simulator to work, you basically need one real main element, and that's the domain object. So the domain object is essentially a cube, like this default one right here, and this cube will act as the boundary box for the simulation. So the smoke will be calculated inside this cube, and no smoke will be going outside of it. So basically you just need to make the cube however big you like. Something like that is fine. It doesn't really matter. Just keep in mind, the bigger you make the cube, the longer it's going to take to bake. So that's very important, unless you don't have a life and you just like to watch computer baking. I don't know, you guys might like that. So once you've got that, we then need to create the flow object. So the flow object is basically what's going to be putting the smoke into the scene. So it can be any object, doesn't really matter. However, because this is going to be an explosion and we want that kind of mushroomy cloud type effect, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add an icosphere. Now you can use a UV sphere if you like. However, I found just from my experience, the icosphere gives a lot nicer results because you don't have those rings appearing on it. It just caused problems when I used it. So I'm going to use the icosphere. I'm going to turn up the subdivision there, and I'm going to cut it in half. The reason I'm cutting it in half is because I don't like that half. It's annoying. Also, we don't want an explosion underneath the ground. You know, that's a bit stupid, so that's fine. Okay, and it's important you don't put the flow object resting against the side of the domain cube. In fact, don't put it anywhere near it. Somewhere like there is fine. If you put it too close to the edges, then you'll find when you calculate it, you get some weird results, like chaotic looking smoke that just goes bleh and just everywhere. And yeah, you won't know why, and then you'll remember this tutorial that I made, and you go, ah, I remember. So once you've got that flow object, we then need to create a particle system. So go to the particles here and click plus. And I don't know if you can hear that, but my cat is meowing because she's outside. Now, a common mistake that people make in Blender is they assume that because they have to create a particle system for the smoke simulator, that they need the particles to form the behavior of the smoke, and that they try to make the particles waft up like that, or for an explosion, make the particles eject like that. That's the wrong way to go about doing it. The particles are only the entry point for which the smoke will appear. So basically the particle, for an explosion, they really only need to appear on one frame, just like right there, and then that will put the smoke into the scene, and then the smoke simulator will do the rest. So that's basically what we need to do. So for here, under the start and end frame, I'm going to set both of them to 2. The reason I've set it to 2 and not 1 is that I've found it just helps if you have one frame at the start of the animation where there's nothing happening. Just a little tip there. So basically that means all the particles are now appearing on one frame like that. I'm going to go ahead and turn off the gravity as well so that they don't fall. Now, usually, like I said, for a smoke simulator, setting the lifetime to 1 is really all you need, so the smoke appears just, on one frame like that. However, I found with the, for an explosion, it helps if you just set that a little bit higher, just to a lifetime of 6. And that just gives you that result there, and that just, I don't know, gives the smoke simulator time to sort of find the particles and create smoke out of them. Just, through testing, I found it helps. Just a little bit higher than 1 helps. And then another thing down here, underneath render and display, by default, Blender will render each of those particles as halo objects. I don't know if you've used much of halos, but they're usually pretty awful. They just show up as like white dots usually. So go ahead and set that to none, because we don't actually want the particles to show up in the render at all. We only want the smoke to. So leaving it as none. And then down here under display, set it to point so that you can still actually see the particles in the 3D viewport. Okay, so with that done, we now have that result like that. So we've got our domain cube and we've got our little flow object there with a particle system. Fantastic. So now we can get into the smoke simulator. With the domain object selected, go over here to the physics panel, click add under smoke, and then click domain. So all of these settings here are going to affect how the smoke inside this cube here behaves. So you can see you've got gravity, heat, vorticity, time scale. The main one you're going to be fiddling with though is the resolution. So you can see there the divisions is set to 32. That's pretty low res. For higher resolution, like for my final animation, I use 200. So it really depends on how much RAM you've got in your computer and things like that. But the longer, the higher you set that, the longer it's going to take to bake as well. Another important one is down here, smoke high resolution. If you check that box, it will give you sort of like an outer layer on the smoke, which just gives you like high resolution little wavelets. So just little fine details of the smoke by checking that. So that really helps. Although, like I said, it does add to the baking time. So usually I just leave that off until the final baking. Okay, so we've got the domain added into the smoke simulator. We now need to do the same for this object, our little flow object. So we're going to click add under smoke again, and then click flow. So now, with both of them set up, if we hit Alt-A now, you can see we get this result right here, which isn't bad. It's behaving relatively like a mushroom cloud, I guess. It's not too bad. It's not fantastic either. With that object there selected, if you go here to initial velocity, what that'll do, if we check that, is it will actually force the particles out like that. It'll force them and make the smoke eject from the object. So it will use the value from the particle settings underneath normal. It will take that value and force it out of the object. So it just makes the smoke just move a little bit faster as it ejects from that object there, which kind of helps. Another thing I did for my final one is I took this bottom layer of vertices there, and if I just, whoop, I hate it when that happens. Turn on proportional editing. If I just create sort of a shape like that, that changes sort of the way the smoke appears, because it's no longer smoke ejecting from the sides like out there. It's just becoming slightly. So instead of it ejecting at that angle, 90 degrees, it's ejecting it as, 45 degrees kind of thing. So that gives you slightly different smoke. It looks a little bit cooler, I found. So that's why I used that. Okay, so now we've got, the base of, how this little mushroomy type cloud is going to appear. Now what I want to do is to create some debris. So I want to make it look like there's been little small fragments of metal have just ejected from it, and there's like little smoke trails, and it just helps. Just kind of looks a little bit cooler than having just a big mushroom cloud. So I'm going to add another icosphere. Just going to scale it down. Just put it, in there like that. Doesn't really matter about setting the icosphere resolution settings. It's fine like that. I'm going to add a particle system to it. Pretty basic. I'm going to set the amount to 20, because each of those little particles is going to be a smoke trail in the sky like that. Okay. Again, I'm going to make the start and end frame 2, so it all appears in one frame. I'm going to turn the gravity way down to a 0.1, just so you have a little bit like that. And let's have a look at how this looks. So we get the particles appearing like that. I want them to shoot up a little bit higher. So underneath velocity, just going to turn up Z so that they appear like that. It's a little bit too, I think it looks alright. Maybe just turn down the normal so that it's not going out to the sides as far. That's fine. And then for the lifetime, I'm going to set it to 100. The reason I'm not setting the lifetime to 1 like that is because I want each of these particles to make a smoke trail behind it. So maybe 120. Maybe 100's fine. And I'm going to turn random up as well, because in probably real life as well, sometimes those little particles that just disappear randomly just in the sky as they burn up. So I don't know, setting it to random kind of makes it a little bit cooler, I guess. And I'm going to do the same underneath display and render, set it to none and point as well. That should be fine. And then go to the smoke settings and just add it as a second flow object, basically. So now we have this kind of result here, which looks a little bit blotchy and a bit blobby because probably the resolution is a little bit too low. Maybe let's just set that to 50. You can see the kind of results we're getting now. Those little particles are appearing. So it looks kind of cool. Not bad, I say. All right. So now we've sort of got the way we want the smoke to appear. It's looking pretty good. Actually, one final thing I'm going to turn, just with this domain object selected, vorticity to 3. That just gives you more little waves and swirls and patterns and things like that. Just makes it a little bit cooler, I find. Yeah, so we've got it set the way we want. One thing that you will note is that the smoke is moving pretty fast. It's just wafting up there, and pretty much by the end of 2 seconds into the animation, frame 50, it's reached the top of the domain. So it's moving too fast, basically. Underneath here, with the domain selected, underneath where it says time, that's the time scale. So you can actually, without adjusting any of those settings, having to adjust the normal or the particle amount, things like that, if you just turn the scale all the way down to 0.2, so the lowest it will go, that will keep the shape of the smoke that we created, but it'll make it move a lot slower than it was before. So I find, that's really the best way to go about doing it. You can go through and alter the amount of particles in the thing and change the normal amount and things like that. I tried doing that just through experience. It doesn't work that well because the only way to get that mushroom cloud effect is to make it appear really fast, but then slow down that scaling amount. So that's just a little tip there for you. Again, it just depends on what sort of look you want for your explosion. Almost sounded American there. For your explosion. So yeah, just play around with the settings, but I've set mine to 0.2 just to make it sort of moving a bit slower. If you were doing like an explosion for a grenade or something, might want to turn the scale up, depends. All right. So now we've got the shape we want it to do. We can now go ahead and do a final bake, okay? So I'm going to set my resolution to, let's say 85, and I'm going to turn on smoke high res as well. Now, one important thing to do before you get into the baking is to save your blend file. Second attempt. That's right, this is a re-recording. So you need to save your blend file because Blender needs a place to store the cache files, and it won't store the cache files unless you save your blend file. Just a little tip. Then you go into Smoke Cache right here, and you can set the start and the end frame for the smoke simulation. I don't want it to be 250 frames, so I'm going to set that to 150. And I need to do the same here for Smoke Cache, end at 150. And underneath Smoke High Resolution Cache, you've got another one as well. So I'm going to set all of those to 150. So, okay, with that done, it's also important to note for my final animation, I used a higher resolution division. I used 200 there and a Smoke High Resolution division setting of 3. So mine was pretty high res. It depends how much time you've got on your hands, I guess. So there we go. So with that all set up now, just need to go into one of these case panels here and click Bake All Dynamics. So it's baking it now, and I'm going to pause it while it does that. Okay, so roughly 10 minutes has passed, and I've got a result looking like this. So a lot more high res and looking quite cool. Now we're going to get into the rendering stage. So this looks fine in the 3D viewport, but a few things need to change for it to actually appear in the render. So first of all, I'm going to position the camera right here. So you can do that by pressing Control Alt number pad 0 and just move it backwards like that. Okay, and I'm going to set the sky to black just so we can see what's happening a bit better. And that lamp is fine for now. Okay, so let's move on to the material for our smoke simulator. So go to the Material tab and click New. Now, we're going to be using volumetrics. So from the top here, we're going to select Volume right there. Now, the default value is Density set to 1, we're going to set that to 0. Now, you might be wondering why we're going to do that, because now in the 3D view, in this little preview window here, it's disappeared. If we left that as 1, it would render the entire cube as one big solid block of cloud, essentially. We don't actually want that. We only want it to appear where there is, real smoke in our simulation. So we need to use the simulation data in the texture field to set that up. So, but we'll get to that in a second. For now, we're just going to leave that as 0. The other thing I'm going to do is turn up the density scale. I'm going to set it to 6. The higher you set that, basically the thicker your smoke is going to look. Another one is scattering. That applies sort of, the surface of like how much light passes through the smoke, and how much sort of like, sticks on the surface kind of thing. And emission. So I'm going to set the emission for this to 20, which is really, really high and a lot more than you'd normally do. But I just want the fire to be glowing quite profusely. So that's why I'm setting it that high. Okay, so now we've set that up. Those are pretty basic settings there. We're going to go to the texture panel. I'm going to click new. And from the type, I'm going to select voxel data. Voxel data is the smoke simulation data, essentially. That's what it's using. We need to go down here underneath voxel data before we do anything. And for the domain object, you need to select the name of the object, which is the domain. In this case, as you can see right down here, the bottom left-hand corner, it's cube. So I'm just going to select cube. Now, if we go up here, you can see in this little preview window, you've got these little weird smudgy patterns there. That's kind of like a top-down view of the smoke, from my understanding of it anyway. It's a top-down view. And I'm going to turn off emission and turn on density. This was a technique that was taught, I think, by Mika in his tutorial, I think. But it's basically, if we go back here to our little preview window, you can see that the smoke is now appearing. So what that's done is it's instead of using density there or anything like that, it's just using the voxel data, setting it as density, and that works fine. So I'm not going to adjust any of the colors or anything like that. Just going to leave it there. I'm now going to add a second texture. Set it to voxel data again. Change the domain object to cube again. And now this time, what this is going to do is it's actually going to become the parts of the explosion that are going to be fire. So this one is the smoke. In fact, I might label them just to make it a little bit easy for you guys to understand. Smoke, fire. Okay. I'm going to, underneath the influence, I'm going to turn on emission color, and emission. Okay. And now if we go here to ramp, what I'm going to do is basically sort of paint out what a flame looks like. Okay, so it probably makes sense if I just show you. If I just sort of adjust these colors here, just to get sort of a yellowy color there, and then an orangey color at the end here, like this, like so. Now what that's going to do is it's going to take the parts of this smoke that are really, really thick, and it's going to make it white, and then the less and less thicker it is, it's going to become yellow and then orange. So as you can see in the viewport there, it's giving us sort of a look of how it's going to look, and that is basically what it's how it's going to look. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take that smoke layer there, and then this fire is going to be placed on top of it. So we're going to set that to multiply, which is a little bit confusing, but because we're using emission there, we want the smoke to just be rendered as per normal, and we want this to be multiplied over the top of it, and that's going to affect then the emission value. Don't worry if any of that confuses you. It confuses me. Don't worry about it. It just that's how it's done. So I'm going to save this now just in case Blender crashes again. And you can see we get a result looking like that, which isn't, it's not too fantastic, but it's all right. It's one problem I noted, and one thing I found was really difficult to get working, was that it doesn't matter how much you really adjust this. You can adjust this, as much as you like, and you can get more fire, less fire. It doesn't really matter that much. But the problem always remained in that I could never get the fire to appear in just the mushroom cloud and have the smoke, the middle part just being smoke, as well as, these whole trails there. There shouldn't be fire all throughout those trails, just the tip. And I couldn't figure out how to get it working. And then I finally came up with an idea, and it worked. So I'll share that with you now. We're going to create fire mask. I'm going to set the type to voxel data again. Set the domain object to cube again. And I'm going to leave it as emission. Okay, and I'm going to set it to multiply again. So pretty similar to the way it was before. And then underneath ramp, what I'm going to do is with this slider, I can actually define which parts of the mesh to mask out. Oh, actually, one other thing I forgot to do. Here, this is the important bit. Okay, source where it says density, we're going to change that to velocity. Now, what this is going to do is it's going to mask out everywhere in the animation that isn't moving fast, as in, it's not the velocity isn't very high. So the sort of the stationary still parts of the mesh, such as this middle part where there's gonna, I hope it's just gonna be smoke, it's gonna leave them as smoke, and everything else is gonna be fire. So hopefully what that will do is it'll give us the result that we want. The more I set that across, the more and more fire is appearing. So if I move that right down there like that, move that down there, then if we render this now, you can see we get this result here. So obviously that's less fire than I want now, so I've sort of gone the opposite way. If I just turn this up a little bit more, you fiddle with it a little bit, and you'll get sort of a result that you like. We just turn that there. Got a similar result as we did before. And, something like that looks fine in my eyes. Yeah, that's alright. I mean, fiddling with it a bit more, we'd get better results. And I think because the low res of this actual smoke simulation, it's turning out a little bit weird. And also, there's a light on the right-hand side, so you can't actually see the smoke appearing there. But it would look right if there was a lamp that was sort of everywhere. But anyway, it doesn't really matter. It's not all that important. We just want to get the basics of it down pat. There is one other feature, one other little point I will tell you about, is the step size for the material. Now the step size, the lower you set that amount, the clearer it will be. So if you have a look at this render here, you'll see it's quite noisy. You've got a lot of artifacts appearing there. So the lower we set that size, then the high resolution the render is going to be. However, it does take longer to render, as you can see there, but it's looking a lot nicer. So not too bad. Okay, what I'm going to do now is add the ground. Okay, like this. Now, for my animation, I actually made the ground higher than the actual explosion point. The reason for that is that with the heat, and it's sucking the smoke upwards like that, the smoke was always being raised off the ground. I couldn't figure out a way to fix it, but I found that if you just raise the ground upwards like that, and just sort of make it starting there, then it works sort of perfectly fine. Just sort of, yeah, just stay stationary just to where that point is there. So that's fine. So I'm going to add a material for our ground here. And the only thing I'm really going to change is just set it to receive transparent. And what that will do is if we render this now, it will actually cast a shadow onto the plane of our smoke. As you can see right there. So if you don't set it to receive transparent, then you'll see like a big black box casting a shadow over there, and it looks really nasty. So make sure you do that. Now we've got a lamp over here to the side. If you wanted to do like a daytime scene, that'd be all right. I'm gonna do like a kind of nighttime scene. So I'm gonna just make it a sun lamp and give it a really small value, 0.05, and make it slightly blue. So that'll just make the smoke appear just a little bit, but not too much. I'm gonna now create a second lamp. If I can find it, there we go. And position it around about there, and I'm going to give it a color, something like that. That should be fine. And let's have a look at how this looks when rendered now. Okay, so you can see it's now making a nice glow everywhere. It's probably the wrong color, and I've also given it specularity, which is making the ground glow like that. Let's set this to a little bit more. How was it looking? Maybe less orange. Something like that. Could be fine. So it's basically just a matter of matching the lamp to the actual color of the atom explosion there. For my actual animation that I did, what I did was I I animated the color and the energy value. So that when the bomb first appeared sort of down there, I set a keyframe so that it moved upwards, the lamp, so it moved upwards with the actual explosion like that. And then as it moved upwards, the color of it changed from yellow to an orangey dark color. So the energy value then decreased as it got upwards. Yeah, so you can play around with the lamp values, and you know, lamps really do help sell the scene as well, because otherwise you've just got a big fireball just sort of pasted onto the scene. So unless you sort of make it fit into the scene and interact with everything and cast light properly, then it's not really going to look right. You can also, if you like, you know, if you animated the energy amount and then went and added, I won't do it. If you added a noise modifier, then you can make it sort of flicker. I've got a tutorial on how to make a flickering thing if you want to have a look at that. But yeah, that can be another little cool effect that you can do. So this is, it's looking, I wouldn't say fantastic. Set that down a little bit, maybe 6. And actually, I might make it a little bit orange as well. Let's have a look at how this is rendered. Alright, so it's looking okay. And I mean, it looks a little bit kind of crap with this lamp here. I mean, I'm just going to delete that because otherwise the whole lamp is lighting up, and you get that whole sort of blue area apart there, which, you know, I don't really like. So let's going to delete that. So you won't really see the smoke detail, but, you know, at least it looks a little bit better for the render. Okay, so we've got a nice looking explosion there. Now what I'm going to show you how to add is the shockwave effect. Okay, now this is something. When I was first making the explosion, I thought, I won't really need that. It doesn't really matter. But when you look at it rendered, it looks stupid without a shockwave. It's sort of like something the eye expects to see, because like we're used to, I don't know, we're used to seeing it. Maybe if you live in like a war-torn country, you're used to seeing it. But Hollywood movies and things like that. But you always see a shockwave, like a blast wave of, you know, debris and dust kicking up everywhere. So you need to add it. So to create it, what I did was I just added a circle. If you press T, you can change the options here. I'm going to set the amount of vertices to 500, which is maximum. And you can see the smoke simulation is just flipped out there and just deleted the smoke, but we can get that back later. That's fine. With that done now, okay, so we've just got a nice circle there. I'm just going to extrude it, scale it in. Whoa, turn off proportional editing. Scale it in, extrude it again, scale it in, like so. In fact, I probably could have shortcutted that just by scaling it in once and then cutting it several times. Doesn't matter. Alright, that's fine there. And now I'm going to add a particle system to that ring. Okay. I'm going to set the lifetime to 10. Let's see, velocity amount to 0.5. Now this will all make sense sort of as we move along. I'll just sort of show you how it's done. It's kind of an optional step. I don't know, I just said it was pretty important. But, you know, you don't really need it, but I'm just going to show you how I created mine. I'm now going to move to the first frame, and that'll bring the smoke simulation back as well. I'm going to add a keyframe for the scaling of it. So it's scaled there. And then I'm going to move to... it really depends how long you want the shockwave to reach the camera. So for mine, I think I made it go to frame 70. Scale it right out past the camera, and then add another keyframe. So that now if you move it backwards, you can see you get a result like that. Now what I'm going to do is crank up the number of particles. Going to make the particles appear all the way to the end of the animation, so 70 right there. And the normal amount, that will be... it'll eject from the way that the normals are facing, which currently would probably be screwed up because of the way I created the circle. So I'm just going to recalculate the normals, and they're being ejected the wrong way, and we've also got gravity. So I'm just moving through this very quickly because this is a rather boring process. Where is it? No, that should be fine. No, I'm going to flip the normals. Okay, so basically what we want is the particles... Helps if I move on this way. You can see the particles raise up slightly. Just sort of like there's a sound wave and it's kicking up the dust as it moves. And I'm also just going to give it a little bit of gravity as well. That's important. Okay.
Let's move into frame 1. Okay, so those particles are moving past the camera. It's raised slightly, and then the gravity's pulled it down slightly. So it's basically behaving exactly like a shockwave would. Kicks up the dust, and then the dust floats down to the ground the way it should. Now, if we go to the material settings of that shockwave effect there, I'm going to set it to halo. I generally don't like halos, but if we would have a smoke simulation for that whole area there, it would take forever. So, and it kind of looks all right with this, so I'm just going to use this. I'm going to set the alpha to right down to, let's say, 0.05. Set the color to, white could be all right. Size to 0.3. Hardness way down so you don't actually see that middle point of the halo, which always looks bad. Let's move that to there. And I'll just render this now just so we can see how it's looking. Hopefully it looks not too bad. It's not too bad. It's got that nice shockwave effect there, but it's, I don't know, it's like a big white thick cloud. It's way too alpha E. Way too much alpha. Let's see how this looks now. So you want to be able to see the ground through the smoke, the shockwave effect, but not too much. I think this should be okay. It also depends on how many particles you've got as well. If you have more particles, then you're going to need to turn that alpha value down, like I am now. If you have less, then you can probably turn it up. Because basically they're overlapping, like alpha values do. And the more particles you have, the thicker it's going to look. So, I mean, I can't get it any lower than that. Or maybe I can with multiple... Yeah, doesn't matter. That's fine. With a proper scene, like I did with my desert scene and things like that, you can see the texture of the desert flowing through it, and it looks pretty good. And if you just set it to the color of the lamp, it will blend in a little bit better as well. You can set it to shaded. Whoa, I don't know what that was. I think the dog kicked over a bottle or something. Yeah, you can. If you set it to shaded, then it will pick up the light a little bit better, but that can look a little bit strange as well. All right, so now that we've got a sort of a basic, good-looking explosion, we're going to get into the compositing now. So through the compositing, we're going to be adding glow effects, just as a final sort of last thing to add to the scene. So just pressing Control left arrow, by the way, and right arrow, you can switch between the compositing. That's pretty quick little tip there for you. Okay, so to add the glow, fairly simple. I'm just going to add a blur node. And let's have a look. Okay, so just going to blur this. And for anyone who's ever done adding glows in the past, the more you set that X and Y value, the bigger the glow, obviously. I used fast Gaussian. That gives you a nice sort of smooth glow effect. And then I'm going to add a mix node just to mix the two. Going to set it to add. Let's have a look at how that looks. Change that to 1. Okay, so that looks all right. One thing you want to do, though, is you'll notice that this is actually it's blurring the entire scene, including that light area underneath it. So you can either move just that smoke, that explosion glow, just to a completely separate layer, a separate render layer through there if you like, or a cheaper way is to add an RGB curve like this, and then just tweak this as such. Let's just have a look here. Oh, not like that. Okay. So now... Whoa. Yeah, that can get you some strange looking results like that. But, it's not too bad. Another one, I'm just going to add another glow. So I'm just going to duplicate that blur node there. Duplicate the add node. Connect the two like this. So this is just going to give me a slightly bigger glow, basically. I'm just going to set this to 256, like so. And turn that glow value way down to something like this. Now, something you can do if you're interested, this is what I did for my animation, to get it so that you get that really big blown out glow effect for just the start of the animation, like when the ignition of the bomb is, when it's detonated, you can animate this value. So if you move to, say, let's go back to our scene, let's say something like frame 70, I'm going to add a keyframe there, and then if we go to frame 1, and then if I set this to 5, you can see it's blown out. And then if I add another keyframe by hovering over it and pressing I again, then now if I just pull up the timeline, you can see as I move through this, that add value there has been animated. You can also animate these these values there if you wanted to. You can animate the colors of things, That's just a quick way of adding like little keyframes and things to the compositor. So it's a quick little tip there for you. But there you go. So there's a number of other things that you can do to complete the final scene. I think for this tutorial, I'm just going to leave it there. But like I said, you can animate this lamp so that it moves upwards with the explosion. It's fairly simple that. Just moving like that. There's a whole range of other things. For mine, what I did was I took the plane, the desert floor that I created, I UV unwrapped it, and then I created a little textured black spot right underneath there. So right where that, where the bomb goes off, I created a little black spot there, and what that does is just, gives you like a little place mark. Because if you have a look at this, it does look a little bit strange, there not being a mark there. The other thing I did, you'll notice there, it still looks like a little bit hollow, like not very thick there, between, where that, the smoke is whooshing up. It kind of looks a bit bare. So I couldn't figure out a way to create the smoke so that it was thick there, because basically the smoke is being sucked upwards, and as far as I know, there's not really a way that you could go about doing it. So what I did for my final scene, and actually I might just bring it up so I can show you. Might take a while. There we go. No, it's all right. I added this little thing right here. So this is just a little particle system with halos again, completely set to black. And it just makes the smoke look a little bit thicker underneath it. So that's not the scene, by the way. This is just pulling up the last render. So it would just add like black smoke underneath there, and it just helps it look a little bit more realistic, a little more thicker. And to get it so it curves in there, I've got this force field here, pulling those little particles in there. So there's a whole range of other little things there. Also for people, you can download this finish.blend from blenderguru.com. However, just be advised that I'm pretty sure this scene mucked up big time, because in the domain things here, I actually found that the heat was actually reversing the way it's supposed to be. So the higher I set it, the more the smoke sank. So that was really, really strange. I'm not sure why it happened, but that's just something to be aware of. If you're trying to copy my exact scene here, there's a couple of things which, are probably not going to be relevant to the scene you're creating. But there you go. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Hope you got something from it. As usual, interested in seeing what you guys make. So if you make a cool animation or something like that, post it up on YouTube. Put a link in the comments underneath once you've made it. I like seeing what you guys make. It's always fun seeing what people interpret from a tutorial. So yeah. So that's all from me. Thanks very much for watching.